This has to be the best job in the world that somehow I fell into. When I look across the room at our Air Force family, it's incredible. Believe me, the Chinese would not like what we're going to talk about and what we're doing, and the fact we're all together here today focused on defending this nation, all of us together. So special thanks for everyone in the room attending, of course our sponsors, our defense industry partners. When we can put defense industry in the same room with our warfighters and go as rapid as we can from requirements to delivering combat capability to the enemy, life's good. Also, thanks for the media to be here. You all get criticized sometimes more than you deserve. If we don't tell the story about the most lethal conventional combat force in the world, we're going to miss an opportunity to defend this nation. So the media is directly involved here. The good news is this morning we have the leader of the most lethal conventional combat force in the world, General Mike Mobile Holmes. It's incredible when you think about what's going on across our combat air forces supported by Air Combat Command around the world. We're taking the fight to the enemy 24/7, and we should never, ever forget our officers and our enlisted personnel, our warrior airmen, who are defending this nation. It's about airmen. It's not about platforms. We're looking forward to hosting, I hope, everybody in the room at our Airspace Cyber Conference here in 3 weeks. It's focused, just like I tried to, I think, outline here, on strengthening our warfighter and industry partnership to stay ahead of what might be the most competitive set of enemies with the most advanced technology we've ever asked our airmen to face. It's a challenge. And we won't continue to deter our enemies and defeat them decisively unless we have a strong warfighter and industry partnership. So thanks for being here. Again, it's an honor for Doug Rayberg and me, certainly, as the new guys, supporting all of you in our Air Force Association and our staff to be with you. And so General Holmes, 38 years plus doing this, supported by Sarah. There's a young man named Stab over at the 113th sitting alert in his F-16 this morning. It's a family affair. So thanks, sir, for being with us. And please join me in welcoming General Holmes.
Can you hear me okay? We'll try the microphone. A little different today because I'm talking to what's usually kind of a home team and doesn't need a lot of explanation about Air Combat Command, but we also have a C-SPAN audience with us this morning, so I'm going to stand over here next to the slides so we can do all this at the same time. I'm happy to see everybody. Orville, thanks for the invitation. It's good to see old friends and new friends, and thanks for taking the time to come out this morning. We did a session with the Defense Writers Group on Monday. We're here with you guys this morning. I'll leave this morning and we'll go talk to a Women in Defense conference over at the Convention Center. And happy to do that. We have our expeditionary senior leaders out brief today over at the Pentagon, which is where we bring last year's commanders that were deployed into AFCENT. After they've had a chance to come home and regroup a little bit, we bring them back together to get advice from them and see what we can do to better support the folks that are over there now. And then I have a session with some professional staffers this afternoon. So busy day. We try to fit in as much as we can when we come to town. And so let's go ahead and get started. Again, I know this is a home team, but with the audience out there, we wear a patch on our shoulder that says People First, Mission Always in Air Combat Command. As Orville said, it's about our airmen. Our airmen operate the platforms and the systems that make us a great Air Force. We could have a PhD dissertation about mission first, people always, people first, mission always. Our heritage goes back to kind of started by General Creech and his disciples, that if we give our airmen the tools and equipment and the right training, if we empower them with responsibility and authority for their mission and hold them accountable for it, that we'll be effective. And so that's our approach. Slide, please. Go ahead and build. You know those three on top. There should be a build here quickly that I won't spend much time on, except to say uniquely among the services, the Air Force is organized in functional 4-star commands. So we have Air Combat Command and Air Mobility Command and Air Space Command. where the Army has a Force Comm, the Navy has a Fleet Forces Command, and that means we do business a little bit differently. Slide, please. And we start off with this mission statement. I'll let you read it. I've been going back and forth a couple of times with our commanders and others. The main thing in there is that our job is to organize, train, and equip airmen to be presented through our service components to COCOMs all over the world. Our airmen fight on the ground and in the air and in cyberspace in the electromagnetic spectrum domain to control the airspace and cyberspace. And why is space up there in Air Combat Command? It's because no matter what happens as we go forward, our Unified Space Command standing up again here at the end of the month, discussions about having a separate Space Force under the Department of the Air Force or separately. There are a lot of terrestrial threats to our Space Forces that we're going to have a close partnership with Air Combat Command, however we end up organized with the Space Force. Anti-satellite technology launched from the ground, directed energy launched from the ground, cyber attacks launched from the ground or from the air. It's going to take a close partnership among all elements to control the airspace, and I've come to believe that we're not going to be able to control the air and space without exerting some amount of control on the electromagnetic spectrum, of which cyber is a component of that. Slide, please. Underneath Air Combat Command, we have numbered air forces, which is the next echelon of command. Our command chief, Chief Master Sergeant Dave Wade, is sitting back here. Dave, raise your hand. He's waving at you. Here, Dave came to us from 9th Air Force, one of our numbered air forces. He's a career maintainer with a great ability to connect with airmen across our command. I won't dwell on this except to tell you that I'm going to come back to it a little bit. So we have numbered air forces that are service components to COCOMs. 1st Air Force is our component to NORTHCOM NORAD. 12th Air Force is our component to U.S. SOUTHCOM. Air Force Central is our component to U.S. Central Command. We support and project those capabilities out to COCOMs. 24th Air Force is our component to U.S. Cybercom. I'll come back to that. 25th Air Force provides global integrated intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to all of the COCOMs all around the world. And so as we look at our structure, one of the things we're interested in is how do we best prepare our Air Force and Air Combat Command for the environment of competition, deterrence, and if we have to, conflict with peer adversaries. What needs to change in the way we organize, train, and equip airmen as we move into this new world? Slide, please. Just build here. The last step is that underneath our numbered air forces, we have wings. And that's the next level down for an Air Force organizational structure. We have wings, we have some centers, but everybody in Air Combat Command can find themselves under this structure, somewhere, somehow. And Orville talked about, the Holmes family. Lieutenant Holmes is sitting alert across town at Andrews today, defending the National Capital Region. In an F-16. His big sister, Rebecca, is a physicist that works out at the National Laboratory at Los Alamos in one of their ISR divisions, and a lot of her work is for AFTAC here, which is one of our organizations under 25th that's responsible for doing the nation's monitoring of nuclear capabilities and events all over the world. So still a family affair for me and my family. Slide, please. And we're spread all over the world. Largely in the United States, but a lot of the red dots are out there across the Middle East. And then since Air Combat Command through 25th Air Force provides the bulk of the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support for all of the service component commands, the distributed common ground systems that are out there around the world are part of Air Combat Command. The weather support all around the world is part of Air Combat Command. And why do we do that? We do that so that we can federate it, and so that in times of surge, we can bring the whole enterprise together to support the COCOM that's in contact with the enemy. So I visited our DGS in Europe this summer. There's a DGS in Langley. There are 2 in the Pacific, 1 in Korea, and 1 in Hawaii, and then there's 1 out at Beale. All of them can work together to provide the intelligence that we need around the world. Slide, please. Now, we have 3 priorities that we focused on for the last 2.5 years. We want to improve the readiness of our units. We have a mandate to do that from our nation, again, as we enter into competition with peer adversaries. And we think to do that, we have to focus on ready airmen, ready families, and then ready weapon systems to put that all together. I can tell you that we're making progress. We're grateful for the sustained spending that Congress has invested in our readiness issues, and we're putting that money to good use. Over the last year, as the money started to come to us really in 19. In 18, we bought back about 4,000 maintenance positions. So a year and a half ago, I would have told you we were short about 4,000 maintainers in Air Combat Command. Now I can tell you we're not short maintainers in Air Combat Command. We're training young maintainers to be experienced maintainers, but we have them in place. Because we laid that groundwork, then when the additional money in the budget in 19 rolled in, we're able to start applying that through Air Force Materiel Command to lay in the parts, to lay in the sustainment, to lay in the extra depot intervals, the things that those miracle workers do to keep our aging fleet ready. And as a result of that, we've gained about 15% readiness across our combat air force. And if you go back and look at history, in about 1978, when we came out of another period of extended high use of our equipment, which drove lower readiness, and General Creech was sitting in my chair at Tactical Air Command, we're able to gain about 12% a year for 5 or 6 years to get back to the readiness that we want to get to, and we've made a good start along that same curve. And for the guys that were my commanders and mentors in that time period that are here in the room, we're going at it pretty much the same way you went at it, and we're getting results, I think, that line up with the methods that you taught us. Empower our folks, give them authority and responsibility for the mission, hold them accountable for it, put them in competition with each other, and off they go, and we start to get improved results. Building leaders to prevail in joint warfights is kind of our part of the Chiefs Build Joint Leaders idea. We're training leaders at our wings, down at the shop and flight commander level, and the superintendent level. We're running an improved squadron commander course at Air Combat Command, which is part of our focus. We've now had 3 years, so we've run all our squadron commanders through this course. We're doing some focused, deeper education on generating sorties and the way we work together to be able to fly more, to be able to train more. I think we're making progress there. And then accepting risk. We rely on, again, miracle workers at Air Force Materiel Command in the Life Cycle Management Center that keep a fleet that averages 30 years old, functional and capable, and that strikes fear into the hearts of the people that we line up against. We rely on the acquisition system that is government, industry paired together to be able to re-equip us. And what we need to do, I think, is go faster, ultimately. I don't have any concerns really about our system, except that we've all got to learn to go faster in a world where our adversaries are going fast, and we don't have the luxury anymore of setting a line out there 20 years in the future that we're going to provide a new capability. We've got to focus on what can we do in the next 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. One of our parts of that is how do we work operational testing that we're kind of responsible for with developmental testing, so OT and DT that Air Force Materiel Command does, to see how can we overlap those and make those go faster. And I can report to you we're making some progress there. And Arnie Bunch, as he takes over at Air Force Materiel Command, his guys from the Air Force Test Center are working with the Warfare Center, and we're working on some proposals to take that to the next step. What can we do to get things done faster and better? Slide, please. And there's a reason why. In 2008, I was a wing commander at Bagram, and among several decisions we made as a nation was we decided to cancel the F-22 program there in 2008 and 2009. And the logic we used to do that was that our adversaries would not be able to field systems that were competitive with the things that we fielded now until into the 2030s. And, we were wrong, right? So our adversaries are fielding systems already that pose peer-level threat to the things that we put out into the field. And so we're going to have to go faster, not just in the platforms, but as the chief says, focusing on the highways that we drive our trucks on. How do we connect? How do we learn? How do we share? How do we get ready for this future that's going to rely increasingly on new capabilities, on information warfare, on the electromagnetic spectrum, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Slide, please. Okay, so I showed you that picture of Air Combat Command and the numbered air forces, and why did I do that? Is because I think as we go forward, there are some changes that we want to drive in Air Combat Command, and I'll talk to you about them. Those service component numbered air forces would be out there on the left. So again, that's 1st Air Force to NORAD NORTHCOM, AFCENT to US CENTCOM. 12th Air Force, we've asked to do two things. We've asked them to be a service component to SOUTHCOM, and then also be the organized, train, and equip parent headquarters for about half of our conventional forces. We're working to see if we can put all those conventional forces under one of our numbered air forces and free 12th Air Force up to focus on its role in Central and South America in support of US SOUTHCOM. Our national defense strategy asks us to concentrate on peer threats first, Russia and China, then rogue states, Iran and North Korea, and then violent extremists. And frankly, all of those things are in Central and South America. Russia is in Central and South America. China's in Central and South America. Iran is certainly in Central and South America. We want US SOUTHCOM through our air component to be able to focus more on that role. And so we're proposing, not a done deal in the Air Force, but we're proposing to align our conventional fighter, rescue, and command and control forces under 9th Air Force. 9th Air Force is also the home to a standing Joint Task Force headquarters capability that we've built so that we can take on, if a COCOM wants us to, that the Air Force can provide a headquarters to go run a task in support of a COCOM like the Army is able to provide a division headquarters or a corps headquarters. We're building that capability at 9th Air Force. They've reached an initial operational capability. They'll lead an exercise this fall, this spring, with U.S. European Command as kind of the next step on reaching a full operational capability. So that NAF will be responsible for both force generation and presentation of our conventional forces, and then driving, working with the wing commanders to get the readiness that's required. And then under the IW forces, this fall, we will combine 24th and 25th Air Force. So 24th has been our Air Force's cyber, 25th has been our global integrated ISR numbered Air Force. We'll put those two things together this fall. Nomination package is working through the process. Don't know exactly when the date will be pending that nomination process, but we'll put those together. You know, that new numbered Air Force, well, I have a slide that talks about it. I'll wait till I get there. And then we'll continue to maintain our advanced training, tactics, and test function at the Air Force Warfare Center out at Nellis. Slide, please. So walking back to those conventional forces and bringing them together under 9th, why do we want to do that? If we can line them up under a single commander, we can take advantage of, you know, a Strike Eagle wing at Mountain Home and the Strike Eagle wing at Seymour Johnson being under one commander and help them work together to achieve their readiness goals. Rescue at Davis-Monthan, rescue at Moody. We'll be able to pull those things together under one commander. We'll be able to optimize their training and support and help them work together. There'll be a single service force provider in those capabilities that works tasking and makes the trades when somebody can't go and substitutes in somebody who can. We'll be able to advocate for all those forces, and we'll have one STANAVAL, one IG that looks across all of those. Slide, please. And then for information warfare. This is a big job we're going to ask this new numbered Air Force commander to do, but it's important, we think, to bring these capabilities together. So this new numbered Air Force commander will be Air Force's cyber. He'll be our service component to U.S. Cyber Command, and we'll have our cyber mission teams that work in that role. He'll also command a Joint Force Headquarters Cyber Air Force, which is focused on EUCOM, TRANSCOM, and STRATCOM. And there are different headquarters led by the services that are focused on different parts of that COCOM challenge. He'll be the Air Force NetOps commander. So he'll also run all the networks that the Air Force provides, both at the unclassified, at the secret, and at the higher classification levels. He'll be our service cryptological component commander, working the support and the airmen that we provide to the National Security Agency and the other things we do across the intelligence community. And we'll be pulling all that together, supporting both U.S. Cybercom and the Air Force cyber role, and then continuing to support the rest of the COCOMs with global integrated intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. If we pull those things together, you know, our belief is that it'll make us more effective across this information spectrum. And frankly, we're still working a little bit about exactly how to define that. We work definitions across the joint world. Kind of to me, information warfare is this larger issue of how do we take all the data that's out there available to us and use tools to make that data work on behalf of warfighters. Information operations, to me, is a little bit more tailored of taking precise intelligence information, crafting a message that will have the right impact, finding the right audience to deliver it to, and then having a means to deliver it to them to drive an effect. 24th Air Force already has some game in that area, and we think pulling the greater intelligence resources together with them will give them even more game in the world that we're moving into. And if our challenge against peer adversaries is that we're in competition, we'd like it to stay in competition, right? We're in a competition with peer adversaries that has a military component that largely stays below the level of armed conflict, and we'd like to keep it there. And so we want to recast that competition on terms that are favorable for us. And part of that is offering options to our national decision makers that they can use in competition that are not necessarily escalatory, but are on the right level with things that our adversaries are doing, so that we can deter malign activities at all levels, from that information warfare level all the way up to major conflict. Our goal here is to provide new options, more coherent options to our national decision makers. So we'll start off with a consolidated component NAF with an integrated staff and a single operations center that ties those things together. And we can do that at IOC this fall. And then we'll continue to stretch and build on that information warfare, information ops capability that we provide through service and cyber components. We'll be able to, we'll still have one commander over all our cyber mission force teams. And we're going to move the 557th Weather Wing over and align it with this NAF. It's been under 12th Air Force, but when you think about what our Weather Wing does, it takes information gathered by sensors all over the world. It uses algorithms and people to work through it, and it provides it out through networks. It kind of fits in with our ISR and cyber missions, and we think it'll have a better home there. And then we're looking at what should follow in our organizational structure. We also expect this NAF to take a lead role in revitalizing the planning capability to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum. With your help, we continue to field some outstanding systems that operate in the electromagnetic spectrum, electronic warfare, electronic combat. But in 15 years of combat focused on violent extremists down at that lowest tactical level, we've lost a little bit of our operational and strategic planning capability to bring all those things together to achieve operational and strategic effects. We think we need to rebuild that. And then we also know that to be successful as we go forward with the systems we built that rely on computer power and rely on identifying the enemy's sophisticated threats in the spectrum to be able to counter them, we want to be able to reprogram faster. And so we'll be taking some steps to look at the enterprise we use to do that. How do we take information on the specific specifications that an enemy system is operating under in the electromagnetic domain, get it back to our reprogrammers and get it turned back out in missionware to our systems so that we can counter that threat in near real time. And our goal is to be able to do that at least within an ATO cycle as our starting gap, and then work to do that faster and faster. And then with this established together, we've looked at all the different information warfare training programs that we have across 25th Air Force and intelligence and cyber and information warfare. And there's the option that we might pull those together under one wing commander to do that a little better and faster. Slide, please. Airmen, highways, the networks that connect them together, and eventually platforms. I know I'm in a room with people that build highways and platforms, so we need to come to this, and this may be what you want to talk about. But these are kind of some of the things then to make that vision happen that we're working on. I'm always going to start with the ones on the top up there. Joint, I'll work through it. Advanced Battle Management System, is based on having multi-domain information, gathering tools to gather information across multiple domains is kind of the bedrock of what we're doing. And then the ability to command and control that in new ways, to take all that data and make sense of it and get it back out. And then the agile communication required to be able to share that data in a contested environment. Those three things are going to be fundamental to everything we do. Multi-domain awareness, advanced battle management, and the agile communications to link those together. And then beyond that, we're working through a transition with Headquarters Air Force on how we plan and design for the future. Headquarters Air Force has taken on a more central role in guiding that. We do the work to help them. We're continuing to work through the modernization of our Air Operations Center through a new DevSecOps protocols to try to do that faster. We've moved or are in the process of moving to an open architecture in our distributed common ground system structure and Intel so that we can make changes in real time and we own that OMS and we can work forward to it. Talked about multi-domain command and control. This fall we will do a joint experiment under the blessings of the Vice Chairman to go think about what does joint all-domain command and control look like. And we'll be building a capability to experiment with that out at Nellis and what you may know as KOC-N out there. We call the Shadow Operations Center. And we're going to be working to see how we can work with the other services to pull this together. When our young folks exercise and they talk about the future, no matter which service, which uniform they're wearing, they come back and say, boss, we're going to have to figure out how to do purple C2 to be able to get the effects we want in the time that we want across service boundaries. We're going to have to pull our command and control together to keep up with the enemy. Talked about DT and OT. To be ready for the advanced threats, we're going to have to make some improvements in our operational training infrastructure. And that means both the live ranges that we train on and then increasingly the virtual ranges where we can do things we don't want people to watch us doing and so that we can go get rep after rep after rep in a more cost-effective way. Thinking about peer adversaries means we have to rethink our approach to homeland defense. And we're working with NORTHCOM on an analysis of alternatives to think about what should our coverage be for the northern approaches that have been the central threat surface that we presented to enemies. But we're going to have to think about that broader across the two giant oceans and the friendly neighbors north and south to give us a unique geographic position. How should we do that? How should we get our awareness for homeland defense? How will we command and control it when you have to reach out pretty far? How will we work with partners that sit out there astride those approaches and paths that we need to make sure that we have awareness of what's happening out there? And then how will we provide the terminal defense required to deter attacks on the United States? We continue, I think, to uniquely lead the Department of Defense in the integration of our Reserve and International Guard forces with our active duty forces and find ways to improve that across the multiple domains we're responsible for. And we have Air National Guard wings right now that have a group that flies RPAs, a group that does cyber, and a group that does ISR DGS, all under one wing. How can we continue to take advantage of that talent that America has in a part-time or full-time role and bring them to bear on our problems? And then I talked about a spectrum dominance wing. Dynamic force employment is the Joint Staff's approach to how do we make the most effective use out of the forces we have to be a little less predictable and to be able to operate around the world facing global problems. We kind of devolved to a view that our problems could be handled within a region under a COCOM. When you think about peer adversaries that operate all the way around the world, we have to integrate that around the world. And dynamic force employment is a way to make use of all of the forces across our joint force and use them in an unpredictable manner without leaving them out so long that we're not able to train and do the things that it'll take for us to regain our readiness. Slide, please. Why do we do all this in Air Combat Command? What are we doing? Well, this is a picture in 2003 of the second invasion of Iraq. This is a team of soldiers that are on the march toward Baghdad. They've been on the road for a couple days. They're pretty worn out. It's time to stop and take a rest. You can tell by the way they've arrayed their equipment what threats they're worried about. They've put their vehicles in a circle to protect them from small arms fire. They've dug some shallow sleeping positions to protect them from shrapnel from mortars. If they're attacked, by a ground force, they're not worried about air attack. Or their vehicles would be distributed and they'd be arrayed in a different fashion. They know that overhead there's a satellite constellation operated by the Air Force and the NRO that will watch their flanks. They know there's an RPA above watching closer for anybody that's pressing them, and they know if they get in trouble, the entire weight of the U.S. Air Force will be brought to bear to look after them. This is kind of what we want it to look like. Slide, please. And, you know, again, for my mentors and bosses in the crowd, this is the first invasion of pushing Iraq out of Kuwait, and this is what happens to a nation whose ground forces aren't protected, who don't control the airspace and cyber. And we want to make sure this never happens to an American or an allied ground force. That's our sacred duty in Air Combat Command, and this is why we work with you to do the things that we do to ensure that we'll have this capability as we go forward. Slide, please. So thanks for giving me a minute to talk you through what we're up to and where we're going, and I'll be happy to take some questions.
Let me set just a few ground rules you all have heard before. We're trying to get to as many questions as possible, a mix of media and certainly our defense industry leaders that are here in the room. And by the way, there's some active duty combat Air Force's leaders in the room, at least one fellow and young F-15 pilot that works over at an OSD working on the next national defense strategy. So don't be shy. This is your opportunity to probably not just ask some questions, but ask some really good questions. So with that, first up, and in the back, please. Start in the back.
Hi, sir. Pat Host from Janes. On Tuesday, you said that you were looking at the longer-term options for addressing the low observability maintenance facilities for the F-22. I was wondering if you could expound upon that. What are you considering? What is wrong with them right now? And are you considering moving them perhaps into forward deployed locations?
Could you please identify yourself?
He did.
From Pat Host from Janes.
From Janes, yep. So we talked a little bit Monday. The question was, hey, what impact does the hurricane on Tyndall have on the readiness of the F-22? And our response was, we've relocated the FTU, the Flying Training Unit, from Tyndall to Eglin, and they're back producing the students that we need to fly the F-22. The operational squadron, the 95th, we dispersed their airplanes, and we're able to take the operational F-22 squadrons and plus them up to 24 assigned aircraft, which we think is the right number to be able to train at the tempo we need to produce mission-ready pilots, and we saw good results from that. One of the factors that'll take us a little longer to work through is that kind of reconstituting the low observable maintenance capability. The bays at Tyndall are operating again, and Eglin is using Tyndall's low observable bays to do some of the work on their airplanes. You know, they're flying them back and forth and they're doing that work. We also have announced that the long-term home of that FTU, that Langley is the preferred alternative for that. And that means we're now working through the environmental impact statement and we're looking at what it will take to bed a third F-22 squadron down at Langley. Langley was originally designed for 3 F-22 squadrons, but when we decided to curtail the program, we didn't build enough low observable maintenance capacity for 3 squadrons. So as we move that FTU, then we'll address the low observable maintenance facility requirement at Langley. In the meantime, we're using facilities that are out there in industry, and we're taking a look at some of the facilities that we built at Holloman and when we had F-22s there, and what can we do in the short term to make use of all the facilities that we have to start buying back the SAS, which is an acronym that talks about how you present the low observable signature of the F-22 to an enemy, and we monitor that as part of the mission capable status of the F-22, and so we're looking for ways to be able to rebuild that capacity that we lost as we work through it. As far as building them downrange, we have ways to do it downrange in expeditionary fashion. It's not as effective or as efficient as doing it in our big kind of home station facilities, but we'll continue to keep doing that kind of the same way we've been doing it.
Industry leader question. Industry? Nobody. Media. Right there.
Hi, thank you, sir, for your presentation. I'm Teresa Hitchens with Breaking Defense. You mentioned doing operations in the competition phase in information warfare. Can you explain to me what your legal mandate is there, vice the IC? Because it seems to me that there's some fairly gray legal issues there.
No, there certainly are policy and legal issues, and any authority we have to do that comes down from the President, either through the Secretary of Defense or through the NSA, and then down to the units that do it in different places. This year, we received some authorities for 24th Air Force to operate in that national space, but you're right. I mean, all the authorities, we won't run an Air Force independent information warfare campaign. We'll provide capabilities that will be operated either by the intelligence community or by COCOMs under the direction of the President and Secretary of Defense. But our job is to build capabilities that they can choose from then to direct and use.
Thank you. David Isby, Air International. In the press recently, we saw a launch of a ground-launched cruise missile, a GLICM. Is the Air Force looking to get back in the GLICM business? And if not, what do you see the integration of this in ACC's future standoff offensive capabilities?
You know, I think I'd probably know the same that you do about that test from what I saw reported in the press. And I don't really have anything to say about it beyond that. Air Combat Command will work with the Department of Defense to think about the right mix of long range and short range and standoff and penetrating options for our forces. And I'm not really in the loop on that test or the national policy issues that would go with deciding if we're going to field a ground-launched cruise missile or not.
John, turn back. You have a question? I'm sorry, Jack, go ahead. You've got an industry question. Great, thanks. Jack Catton Boeing. Can you share a couple of your major sound bites on...
There's a mic, Jack, so they can hear you on television.
I've been told I'm too loud. Thank you very much for the mic. Jack Catton Boeing Company. I know you're going to be talking to congressional staffers this afternoon. Can you share some of your major sound bites on NGAD and the requirement for that as you try to get them to restore your funding?
Well, so we're happy with the recognition in the Department of Defense and in general in the Congress that, like those two slides I showed you at the end of the presentation, our whole joint force depends on our ability to be able to control and exploit the air and space and the cyber capabilities that help us do that. As we go forward in the future, we have to think about what's next. As the work we're doing for next generation air dominance starts with those three overreaching capabilities, like I said, multi-domain awareness, advanced battle management, and the agile communications it'll take to communicate with any system that we might go after. And then we're pursuing the research and the risk reduction to say, what's next? How will we maintain that dominance of the air that let those guys be loggered, pulled in a circle as we go forward in the future? We're working with the Congress to make sure we have the funding to do that. When we fund the defense budget, it's kind of a zero-sum game that has to fit under a top line, and we work through this marks process with the committees. If they move money into a place that they think there's a need, they got to find a place to take it from. And so we'll work through to try to let Congress know how we're spending that money and why we think it's important to spend it and what the benefit is that we can get from spending that money on the schedule that we've laid out. And it's what we do in every program across the department. It's part of the process as we work through it. We appreciate the role they play in it, and we look forward to the chance to continue to explain what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish.
John Turkback, and then really would like one of our majors, likes to hear videos, or even, I guess. Please think about a question, so we want to make this a lot more relevant, and the question you all asked will be relevant to all of us. So thank you. So John.
Morning, General.
Morning, John.
General Milley recently published on defense.gov some ideas that he called myths of modern warfare. And among those were, you're not going to win a war without the significant engagement of the U.S. Army, and you're not going to win a war from afar, which I presume means by air. Have you detected those ideas filtering into the NDS development, the POM process, the budget process, and do you personally agree with that?
I think, John, everything we're going to do is built on a partnership across the joint force, and then based on exactly where you are and what you're doing is how you put the right tools together to do that. So I don't think I know a scenario that we won't need capabilities provided by the U.S. Army to be able to do it. And then there are scenarios like combined arms, continental multi-domain operations and warfare, on the European continent, where the Army is going to play a central role, and Air Combat Command and TRADOC have been working together closely, and now Air Combat Command and Army Futures Command have been working together closely to think about how we will do that together on the modern battlefields. And the Army is bringing capabilities that help us counter integrated air defenses. We're bringing capabilities that help counter the long-range artillery systems that are a threat to the Army. So there's a great partnership there. So I really don't see really any value in trying to drive a wedge between what we're doing. We're going to rely on the capabilities that we all provide as we go forward, and I think we've got a great working relationship and a great partnership with the Army leaders that are thinking about how to do this in the future.
All right, guys, go ahead. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you.
Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, General. Appreciate it. Sir, John Paul Adrian with the Air Force Fellows for this academic year. A few of us were talking about and agreeing with the need to bring the future faster that you were talking about earlier in your presentation. Sir, can you talk a little bit about what is being done currently in changing and improving our acquisition timelines, what's being done with acquisition funding and also legislation to go ahead and cut that from, say, the 15 years down into that 5-year time period that you spoke of?
Yeah, it's certainly, about Dr. Roper or General Richardson or General Bunch and their teams are more expert on it than I am. But I can tell you that work is being done. So to take advantage of new authorities that Congress gave us, and one of the ones we like to talk about are the 804 authorities that let us go with prototypes, compare those to each other, decide they meet a warfighting requirement, and go forward without doing all the milestones in the traditional process. And Dr. Roper has set a goal of trying to cut 100 years out of acquisition by adding up, what you save in different programs, and I think we're making good progress there. Part of the other approach to it is recognizing, as I've been told by industry leaders, hey, you guys still think you're a hardware company, but you're really a software company, that operates hardware with it. Then how do we change the way we acquire things to match up with the way we acquire software in the commercial world and maintain it and sustain it? And we're making some progress there. That's going to take a partnership with the primes as well to think about how we're going to do that in new ways. So I think those are kind of the two primary things that I see progress in. And then I think just across the whole enterprise, a sense of urgency that we have to do things faster. Sometimes that means we make decisions faster that we're going to cancel a program because at the end of comparing 804 prototypes, it doesn't meet the requirement we need, but we found that out faster. And we're ready to go, re-look at it and go to the next thing to try to figure it out. So I think those are the things that I see happening in our acquisition community.
Great question. Thanks. I'll get back in the back. Maybe.
Hi, Valerie Encino with Defense News.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi. A couple days ago, Boeing got a contract to continue rewinging the A-10. And in the past, about a year ago, you and other Air Force leaders expressed some reluctance to treat that contract as a follow-on and just give it to Boeing because there were some concerns about cost and about Boeing's ability to get its suppliers in line and deliver on time. So has Boeing resolved those issues with its suppliers at this point? And are you guys getting a better deal with this new contract?
Well, you're talking to a user.
Right.
Not an
So
acquirer.
I figure you guys want those ready.
I'm happy to know that we have worked a contract solution to rewing the remaining A-10s. It's been a couple articles in the last week or so about completing the first rewinging contract while we've been working the process to get another one. My interest is in finding somebody that can build those wings and get them out there in a cost-effective process. I have confidence that my partners in the AQ enterprise have worked through that and that we're going to be able to have a partnership as we go forward with AQ and Boeing to get those airplanes rewinged. Beyond that, I think you should probably talk to AQ or AFMC or Boeing.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Blaze.
So when you were discussing all your organization and everything, the one thing that didn't come up was the Guard and the Reserve and how you plan on integrating them more, especially when we move to the high tech and you're pulling them out of industry.
So, our Guard and Reserve elements are really organic across Air Combat Command. And as we align our active duty, conventional fighter, rescue, and command and control under 9th Air Force, our plan is to align the corresponding Guard units there as well. I've talked to the General Rice at the Air National Guard and General Scobie at the Air Force Reserve Command about giving us a Reserve and Guard deputy to come be a part of that organization to help us further that integration. I think our future is increasing integration at the unit level. I think as we field new capabilities, it will, I say always, at least almost always, be built on an association of either active and guard or active and reserve. Part of the difficulty of laying up the guard wings underneath one of these NAFs is what I talked to you about, that a single wing in the Tennessee Air National Guard has RPAs that are lined up through the 432nd Wing at Creech, cyber assets that are working through 24th, and an ISR group that's working through 25th. So where do you put that wing in the structure? The answer is, we continue to associate and stay in a close partnership across all those places. We're not walking away from our associations with the Guard and the Reserve. We're fortunate in the things that we do, that our nation has a really strong bench of talent that does work like what we do out in the commercial world, whether that's flying and fixing airplanes, or whether that's working in the IT or cyber industry, or all those capabilities that we're able to bring to bear using the talent that we have are an important part of what we do. And I'm a fan of finding even new and better ways to allow Americans to participate in their defense in whatever way they can. We have an air auxiliary in the Civil Air Patrol that is also aligned under Air Combat Command, a great opportunity for Americans from across the country to be associated with the defense of their nation by working in the Civil Air Patrol. We have opportunities both through AFA with the things that we do, and is it Cyber Challenge? Is that what we? Cyber Patriot. Civil Air Patrol is looking at moving into some of those capabilities. I'd like to see a world where we have an auxiliary that lets Americans come participate in cyber activities and the other things that we do within their time and within what they're willing to commit to be able to bring the expertise that they need. And right now, we've got 100% active duty commitment. We have part-time or full-time commitment in the Guard and the Reserve that pretty much meet the same requirements. What can I do to let people come in and kind of keep their earring and keep their hair and do the other things, but still find a way to participate in what we're doing?
Back in the back, Ted, and then Rich.
Morning, sir. Ted Bowles, II North America, probably more importantly, a proud father of 2 airmen. My question is, any thoughts or discussion using companion trainers for F-35, F-22 fleet to help readiness there?
We published an article, thank you, Orville, I can put that in the way of the light there. We published an article in War on the Rocks in one of the websites where people share information on how we might use the TX in a different way as we achieve that, as we start to receive that new trainer that we're really happy to be getting, to be able to produce experienced fighter pilots faster. My fighter pilot shortage is not just fighter pilots, it's really experienced fighter pilots. And so we're looking at ways that we can use the things that we have in different ways. Can we partner it with the things Steve Quast and AETC did in UPT Next to produce a candidate pilot faster and better, to then take them and experience them faster and better into the combat air forces? And we're looking at ways to do that. As far as a companion trainer, that's not exactly what we've laid out, although in our vision there might be some people that instruct in both. But what we're trying to do is see if we can use a cost-effective venue to move training from the advanced training that happens in an expensive F-22 or an F-35 to bring some of that training down into a vehicle that has avionics that maybe are constructive but look kind of the same, so that you can train the same skill set in people earlier in their career and ultimately be able to produce them faster. And we think maybe reduce the time that it takes for them then to check out and become a wingman or a flight leader and instructor in that follow-on airplane. So that article's out there on War in the Rocks that will give you a little bit more in-depth look into it.
Cool. And then we've got about 5 more minutes. It'd be great to have one more major's lieutenant colonel ask a question, and then we've got allied partners in the room. So one of our allied partners needs to come up voice here. We've got about 5 or so more minutes. Thanks. Bo.
General Holmes.
Hi, Bo.
Thanks for the presentation on Air Combat Command, and thanks for the service for you, continued service for you and your family.
Bo has F-35 son and an F-35 son-in-law in his family too. So.
Thanks for If you would, could you qualify the Century Series comments that you have said in the past? Dr. Roper seems to be piling on, and recently there was a RPA, the RPA business is piling on Century Series. So just qualifying your thought process on Century Series may be helpful.
Sure. So you have heard us talk about the Century Series fighter acquisition program, and I'll be careful because, again, some of my mentors may have lived through that time frame. But the idea is that when we were in competition with great powers, we fielded airplanes rapidly, and then we moved on to the next thing when it was time to do it. And I've talked to guys that were flying straight wing F-84s. They got brand new straight wing F-84s, and then 6 months later they got brand new swept wing F-84s because we figured that was better, and we added it to the airplane, and we continuously passed things down and kept bringing the new capabilities out there. The idea really is how do we move from a 20-year development program that we've done with the F-22 and the F-35 to a shorter development program where we use 804 authorities. We say, what capabilities do we have now that are at a TRL and an MRL? And that means that they're at a manufacturing level and a technology level that they're ready to go. You're not going to be trying to figure them out as you add them to the airplane. What do we have that's ready to go right now that we could put the pieces together, have a capability, put it out there, maybe an 804 process, see if it's better than what we have now, and if it is, start buying them. And then come back a year later and say, what's ready now? Is that better than what we were buying? No, then let's keep buying what we were. Yes, then let's switch to that and do that. We know this is a change in business models. We know there are minimum quantity kind of things to make this something that we can field new capabilities and allow our defense companies to make a profit at. We know there's a negotiation that has to happen as we go forward, but if we're going to do that, a lot of the costs that goes into our airplanes is building airplanes that are made to last 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 flying hours. And if we change to a world where we're going to rotate and pass through capabilities, are there ways that we can find less expensive solutions by not necessarily engineering in? So one of the tests that we're doing is looking at what Will would call low-cost attritable airplanes, which there's a negotiation there on how good does a weapon system have to be to actually give you a capability against the enemy, but then what can you do to make that cheap? And so if you get to a low-cost attritable unmanned airplane that you keep in a box most of the time, you pull out a red flag twice a year to make sure that it works and you know how to integrate it into your capabilities, it doesn't need 8,000 hours service life. It's going to get shot down in 400 or 500 anyway. And so how might we build the airplane different? Might we use an industrial turbine instead of a jet engine made to last 8,000 hours? We might do different structural things. We might think about it in a different way. So there's a lot of pieces to it, but the central idea is just going faster. And when I was talking about this 2 or 3 years ago with the think tank panel and talking about this, one of the guys said, well, of course, General Holmes, because you're back in competition. And so you're back in a world where your enemy is fielding new things that are incrementally better. An example would be China working through with the J-20 and the PL-15, the missile that goes with it, to try to counter the advantage that we've had in the air-to-air environment. What will we do incrementally to go counter that and return the advantage? And how can we work together across this partnership to find a way to shift back to that model? And that's kind of what we're talking about, why we pay some homage to the Century Series development that produced a lot of really good airplanes in a short time that made a difference, that we think, in being able to deter conflict with Russia and kind of end in that Cold War conflict with the Soviet Union.
Last question. We have an ally partner? Please, yes, sir.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Colonel Kalajian, I'm the air attaché at the Embassy of France. I can tell from your great presentation that you're working hard on the lethality of the force,
Yes.
which is the first axis of the NDS. You're improving the procurement and because you're going faster. Can you speak about what you're putting forward for interoperability, which is the third axis of the NDS?
I think that's certainly important on all that we do, and this is an issue that often comes up when we're operating around the world, and it's Examples, on one end of the spectrum are the partner process we use to build the F-35, so that we partnered with some of our international allies where they participated in the development of the aircraft. They're in on all the security details of how we put it together, and so that makes interoperability not easy, but less challenging as we go forward. And then we have great partners like France with its own industrial base that chooses to stay separate. And then how do we pull those together then when we're working together in the Gulf or when we're working together for the defense of Europe? And that's more of a challenge because we're not just protecting our national secrets, but we're protecting proprietary information that leads to profit, for the companies in our country. And so that certainly has been a challenge, particularly with the U.S. and France, an invaluable partner to all that we're doing in the Middle East, and particularly in Africa, which may not be well understood, is France's long-term relationships and knowledge of the African continent and the capabilities that they bring to project power there as a great partner in our activities against violent extremists. Classification is a hurdle in a whole lot of the things that we do. And we work together across the department all the time to try to drive those classification problems down. But yet it's a policy issue that we can't always settle uniform to uniform in the way that we would like to. So we'll continue to work it. We'll continue to advocate for the access that our partners need to be able to operate alongside us. And we're going to have to work, there's an industry and a national policy part of that as well. But you're right, it has to be figured into everything that we do.
Well, thank all of you for being here, and special thanks to General Holmes. I think for all of us, as we continue to engage from Congress, certainly engage with acquisition leaders, from Dr. Roper to Arnie Bunch, Bruce Richardson. Requirements start with you, boss, and you've given us a great outline for how we articulate and reinforce on behalf of all warriors for our nation's security and defending mission. So,
And a t-shirt or a polo shirt.
It's not just a t-shirt. You guys have known me for a long time, you're laugh, but this is the first version of a new AFA shirt that has Airmen for Life. Many Airmen for Life in here. If you're not an Airman for Life, you should be. On the sleeve, the new logo for our Air Force Association, join the fight. And we are in a fight for the future of our nation. So please, sir, thanks for being in the fight, giving us some direction. I've got a medium or a large. You can take them both or give one back.
Thanks.
It's a non-profit organization. God bless you.
Thank you, Orville. I'll take this opportunity real quickly to say that when Second Lieutenant Holmes was commissioned, a friend of our family who was a longtime AFA member and was the president of the Tennessee chapter at one point, gave me a membership in the Air Force Association. And after paying the yearly dues a couple of times, I turned it into a life membership. And in the 80s, that cost me $25 a year for 3 years to turn it into a life membership, which has turned out to be a pretty good deal 38 years later. So thanks very much, and we'll wear those with pride. Thanks.